Alrighty, the croissant diet part 2. My name is Ryan. This is High Carb Regenerator. Welcome to my channel. So let's I finally found a couple more videos about this Brad Marshall. I'm going to watch them in the computer in a couple seconds here. I'm not going to make any more videos about this, but anyway, let's get started. All right, so here we go. We're in the computer. I don't know why I always do it this way. I set it up this way, but here we are. I finally found this guy's YouTube channel. But there's still no like croissant diet, right? There's no video on just, I'm not trying to downplay, the high carb, low fat thing at all. I really like it. It's worked well for me, especially energy wise. My thyroid is completely done a 180. It's working now. Last year, I added 1 pound a day into my diet of sugar, and that actually more than doubled my testosterone within blood tests, I think, which was 6 weeks, something somewhere in that range. I have, I've had this question on my mind because I've done a lot of stuff with potatoes. I've had this question on my mind. Why was every single one of these diets had so much fat in it and it was so effective still? So anyway, I wanted to watch this. Let's see what happens here.
To talk about the actual root causes of obesity using only the most up-to-date science. Episode 1. The Loop, featuring the A-Rod.
The thing is I'm not terribly into science because I think the people who watch this stuff too much become immobilized by it. And I think that immobilization really is, it's turning everybody into dysfunctional, like there's a lack of consistency. And when there's a lack of consistency, you're not going to get any result from anything. But anyway, let's get started.
Hydrocarbon receptor. In this series, you're going to learn how all of these things affect obesity that you've probably heard about. The gut microbiome, you've probably heard your gut bacteria can affect your metabolic health. Check.
And that's why I really think food combining is huge. And that's why I made a video about it. I talk about it in my videos and on my live streams.
It's in there. Dietary fat, whether you eat polyunsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, saturated fat, how does that affect your health? It's in there. Environmental obesogens, these are persistent organic pollutants that stick around.
They kind of just pour out of the skies, out of the plains. It's crazy.
In our drinking water, they're in the air. Sometimes they're in foods like beef. Check, it's in there. Disrupted sleep, torpor. If you upset your...
Sounds like torquing. Or is it Turk? I don't know. I don't know the whole life.
Your circadian rhythms. How does that affect your metabolic health? Check. It's in there. And we're going to follow the money. This is a table of late stage trials that pharmaceutical companies are...
Oh. Well, this is a pleasant surprise, I got to say.
Actively doing, spending tens of millions of dollars on to try to combat fatty liver disease, which affects 35 to 40% of Americans and is a relatively simple thing for them to get drugs approved for. And we're going to look at...
Do we need the drugs if you're not eating the things that cause it?
How are they spending their money? Because that might give us some hints, right? So what is the Loop? The Loop comes from this 2018 paper that was in the journal Nature, which is obviously a widely respected journal. And the question that I've had is, so when you eat, you can see there's a sort of a lizard human up in the upper left hand corner. I apologize for my art skills. It's eating what appears to be some type of squash, perhaps, and it's releasing insulin. And what that insulin does is it activates the aryl hydrocarbon receptor in the liver.
I mean, come on.
When you eat, bile is released. It goes into the small intestine and it helps to absorb the nutrients from your food. As more time passes, the bile moves through your small intestine and 95% of it actually is reabsorbed by the ileum, which is part of your intestine, and it starts making its way back towards the liver via the portal vein.
Torquing.
In this time, 1 to 2 hours after you eat, the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is running unfettered and unchecked, doing its thing. And what does the aryl hydrocarbon receptor do? It is a transcription factor. It turns on...
I swear, I'm going to watch a video after this, so stick around. I might even put some timestamps in if I can remember to do that, of the actual croissant diet. Somebody else does it. I don't know why. If this guy created the croissant diet, why he doesn't just make a video about the croissant diet. Not that I want to make croissants. I really actually don't even like them. But, I mean, come on.
Other gene.
I've never liked them. Mm-mm.
It is a gene that turns on other genes. As time passes, the bile acids make their way and they stimulate something in the liver called the FXR, which in turn releases something called FGF19, which activates another thing called SHIP, which is AKA small heterodimer partner, but I'll probably just call it SHIP. And that SHIP directly,
yes, but does it identify as such?
To ARA hydrocarbon receptor and prevents it from producing other genes, from activating other genes. And so this is a feedback loop that is turning off the ARA hydrocarbon receptor after you eat. The bile ultimately returns to the gallbladder where it is stored until you eat again. And so that is the loop, this feedback mechanism of activating insulin or activating the ARA hydrocarbon receptor after a meal via insulin and bile acid signaling, shutting it back off.
Oh, here we go again.
So chart, this is also from that paper. The ARA hydrocarbon receptor, you can see, rises steadily for about 2 hours after a meal and then stays relatively high for a while. SHIP also rises after a meal, but there's a time lag of maybe an hour or two until the SHIP starts to rise because it has to wait for the bile acid to come back and trigger the FXR. PEMT is a target gene of the ARA hydrocarbon receptor.
Here we go again with this terminology. Like, I'm sure it's legit. It sounds like he's making it up. But
HR upregulates genes involved in single carbon metabolism, and that means methyl groups. And so one of the things AHR does after a meal is it drains your liver of methyl groups.
Here's the thing. I've been studying this stuff since I was 19 or 18. So I understand a lot of this terminology, but for people who coming on here, this is, not their thing.
And so you can see the PEMT, the target gene of the AHR, initially rises in response to the AHR being activated, but then as SHIP steadily rises after a meal, the PEMT goes back down, so that by 4 hours after the meal, the PEMT is back to baseline level. And so the AHR really only is doing its thing.
Honestly, I think a lot of this just boils down to, are your hormones in check? And if they're not, then you're not going to lose weight. Like, it's just not going to happen. It is the way it is.
For 2 or 3 hours directly after a meal. And this is actual walking around humans. The first 5 columns are normal humans. The second 5 columns on the right, the ones that I've underlined where it says steatosis patients, those are people with fatty liver disease. In that red circle, that is the amount of activated SHIP that these patients have. And so you can see that they don't have this feedback loop of SHIP turning off the ARA hydrocarbon receptor. The people that's underlined in red with the darker bands, that's the amount of activated SHIP that normal people have compared to people with liver disease. The yellow circle, those dark bands.
The liver, the fatty liver thing was talked about in the Georgia interview, I believe. But if not, if you go to his highdoot.me website or whatever blog, this is talked about. The fatty liver is talked about quite a bit. Excess fat in the diet is largely to blame. Cortisol is largely to blame. And one of the best ways to get cortisol to lower is to have sugar. So
that means that people with liver steatosis, they make tons of the ARA hydrocarbon receptor. And in normal people, they make way less. So as you can see, the feedback loop that is shutting off the ARA hydrocarbon receptor is lost in fatty liver disease. So what does the ARA hydrocarbon receptor do exactly that causes all of these changes? Well, it is the master controller of fat metabolism. PPAR alpha, you can see there on the lower left, was traditionally known as the master regulator of fat metabolism, but it's actually a direct target of the ARA.
Is this a disgruntled potato?
So
I mean, what is this?
Receptor.
What is going? Is it angry potato? It's got like puppet strings controlling the whole thing.
Controls PPAR alpha. It also controls a gene called CYP1B1. That's the thug in the middle. CYP1B1 oxidizes polyunsaturated fats, among other things. And those oxidized polyunsaturated fats, such as 12-heat, active.
I got to reach out to this guy and just try to get him on here. This is all getting a bit much. I know he's not vegan. So a lot of the vegan people on here are going to get mad just to even have him on here. But
activate PPAR gamma, which is the other master regulator of fat metabolism. And so the AHR is the puppet master controlling fat metabolism. It came to my attention originally because of this graph. This is a paper by the Craig Tomlinson group. They put mice, two groups of mice, on a high-fat diet, designed to fatten them.
Here we go again with the mice thing. You know, when it came to leptin, when they gave mice more leptin who were obese, they immediately got skinny. When they did the same thing with humans, it did not have any kind of effect whatsoever. Matter of fact, I think it made them fatter. So it's not always relevant.
Up for 10 weeks, and then they gave them this drug, which is an...
For somebody who's not into studies, I certainly dip my hand in these damn things so much. I probably should just get away from them.
Inhibitor of the ARA hydrocarbon receptor. And you can see that in literally 1 week, between weeks 10 and 11, those mice completely have reversed obesity. They instantly return to their normal weight once the activity of the ARA hydrocarbon receptor is gone. How does it do this? It activates something called TI-PARP. TI-PARP directly uses NAD+, and so it lowers your levels of NAD+, and it increases your NADH to NAD+ ratio. That's called reductive stress. If you read my blog or watch old videos, I have a whole bunch of stuff about reductive stress. This is how the ARA hydrocarbon receptor gets you there. Also, TI-PARP directly upregulates something called the liver X receptor. The liver X receptor upregulates something called SREBP1C, and SREBP1C is the direct activator of lipogenic enzymes. And so TI-PARP is activating lipogenesis when stimulated by the ARA hydrocarbon receptor. AHR also downregulates AMP kinase by activating something called microRNA 802. AMP kinase actually shuts off lipogenesis, and it encourages you to oxidize, to burn your fat rather than storing it, and the AHR turns off AMP kinase. The other thing that it does is it upregulates something called CD36. CD36 is vastly upregulated in obese and diabetic humans. It basically takes fat up into the cells. So in obesity and in diabetes, your fat cells and your liver cells have a lot of the CD36, and you're just constantly sucking fat up.
You just like naming, are we just like creating just, I feel like this is such a government looking, like when you started a government job or you work in the government, they give you this a handbook the size of your car with acronyms in it. And I feel like he's just pulling some of those out of the post office handbook here. I'm sure I know he's legit. I understand that. And I'm sure somebody's rage quitting right now just from watching me say this, but damn.
Into your cells. It also upregulates PDK4. PDK4 blocks pyruvate dehydrogenase.
Now this one right here, a CD36, like I feel like this, like working at the bank, this is a CD that gives you 3.6% of PDK4 after you have it in the bank for 12 months. This is
which allows you
crazy
to oxidize glucose. And so when PDK4 is high, you can't burn glucose. And if your NAD plus is low, lipogenic enzymes are high, and you can't burn the glucose, guess what? You're going to make it into fat. And so the AHR is setting up this environment that welcomes storing fat rather than burning fat. Why does the AHR have a stupid name, you might wonder? this is a compound called TCDD. This is a common organic pollutant. And we've first discovered the aryl hydrocarbon receptor because people who worked in factories that made this TCDD were getting a wasting disease. So aryl hydrocarbon receptor, when it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, people who were in the factory that made the popcorn, with the powder on it, those people were getting cancer and dying like crazy. If you're a huge Gatorade drinker, you should know that the people that handle Gatorade have to have a hazmat suit on until it's diluted enough in the bottles to drink. It's
crazy stimulated. Also can cause you to waste away because it's so involved in all these pathways involving energy storage. The aryl is because this TCD has rings, right? So aryl means rings. It's a hydrocarbon because it's mostly made out of hydrogen and carbon, and it's a receptor because receptors are things that recognize things like toxins and then respond accordingly.
It sounds like raw vegan's the way to go.
And so what TCDD does when...
Why do we got a potato in jail now, man? Potato is just trying to help you. The puppet strings, not a big deal. The potato wants to help. And this dude's got it in jail.
The aryl hydrocarbon receptor is stimulated from an environmental toxin, an environmental obesogen. It breaks out of that little window of 2 to 3 hours postprandially, where it's, we keep it in this cage, right? SHIP keeps AHR in its cage by bile acid signaling, shutting it down after a meal. And you can see the TCDD is on the keychain there. It's the thing that can unleash the aryl hydrocarbon receptor. If you eat enough of activators of the aryl hydrocarbon receptor, it no longer has to live in that window. So you can see here the little aryl hydrocarbon receptor. He's now bound to this TCDD, and now
that's a potato, man. Potato.
Now the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is in control, and it burns down this whole loop that's repressing it. It starts by getting rid of the enzyme cytochrome P450-7B1, which is involved in bile acid production, and it changes which types of bile acids are produced, and it actually lowers the ones that activate FXR. Another thing that it does is it reduces the proteins that actually take bile acids up into the liver. So less bile acids are taken into the liver, and they're different kinds of bile acids, and that blocks this FXR signaling. And now FXR is...
Now, is all this testing done on mice or actual humans? Because if it's on mice, it might not even be relevant.
No longer able to...
Unless you eat a croissant, I guess.
Activate SHIP via FGF19, and that is the only feedback system in the body powerful enough to shut down the aryl hydrocarbon receptor. Next, the aryl hydrocarbon receptor goes after your gut microbiome, slashing the diversity in your gut microbiome and favoring bacteria that make something called bile salt hydrolase. And guess what? Bile salt hydrolase is also involved in bile acid metabolism. And so on several levels, the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is going after your bile acid metabolism. Lastly, the aryl hydrocarbon receptor increases in adipose tissue an enzyme called IDO1. And IDO1 is involved in tryptophan metabolism, and it converts tryptophan into something called kynurenine.
I'm going to start fast forwarding a little bit here.
Kynurenine is interesting because it is something that we make in our fat tissue are much more likely to be.
This looks somewhat interesting. This angry potato, man.
Two different types of fat, and so you can see the lean humans have low activity levels of IDO.
I'm gonna link this down below, and I'm not really making fun of this. I think some of the terminology is just like, who comes up with this, but yeah.
One, because their hydrocarbon receptor is being kept in check, and the obese humans, IDO1 is massively upregulated, and when IDO1 is massively upregulated, we make more kynurenine. And so you can see the obese humans have significantly more kynurenine than the lean humans. And what does the kynurenine do? Of course, it activates the aryl hydrocarbon receptor.
The potato. So why don't we just put a binder on the kynurenine? Kynurenine?
And you can see this is a positive feedback loop that just keeps running. Okay, 2022 paper pretty much shows the same thing. This one goes into more detail. You can see there's a positive relationship between BMI and IDO1 levels. You can see the obese humans have much more IDO1 in their adipose tissues. IDO1 causes those obese humans to have more kynurenine. You can see the direct relationship between BMI and the amount of kynurenine.
There we go.
Kynurenine, of course, activates the aryl hydrocarbon receptor.
Angry
again,
potato.
You see the positive feedback loop in a 2022 Nature paper. Also, this is an Egyptian study that looked at the amounts of AHR in obese children, and you can see the obese children make way more AHR than do the lean children. This is a paper about dioxin toxicity.
All right, so we know the problem. What's the solution? We can talk about the problem all day long.
And so humans who have a significant amount of this dioxin in their fat tissue are much more likely to be
fat.
Obese. This is
Let's
a study
be
in
kinder
mice.
to people.
They fed
Let's be
kynurenine to mice,
fat acceptance
and even
here. We can't say obese anymore. It hurts people.
this is a controlled diet. These are mice on a very low fat diet that classically would keep mice lean. They're not as fat as mice on the quote unquote Western diet, but they still are significantly fatter. And you can see, especially, they have a lot of subcutaneous adipose tissue.
Shit, am I in the way again?
So if you feed the mice kynurenine, which activates the
I don't
AHR,
think so.
you have more fat tissue, and this is SCD1 down here. The kynurenine upregulates levels of lipogenic enzymes. That's what it does. And you also have dysregulated blood glucose. The AHR makes you insulin resistant. Finally, one more study. This is mice.
This is all mice. Is this relevant to humans?
These mice, this yellow line.
Can you imagine, like, you get up in the morning and you're like, I'm going to go jab some mice today and act like I'm legit. I mean, this is I'd rather be a DoorDash driver.
They were given small amounts.
I mean, what did the mice do to you? Why are you so mad at them?
While they were pregnant. Then for 8 weeks, they were maintained on a normal chow diet. They don't get fat, but as soon as you switch them onto a diet that causes fat, they rapidly gain weight compared to mice who have not ever been exposed to TCDD.
So it had nothing to do with the amount that they were eating. It had something to do with what they were eating.
You can see there, AHR activation makes you incredibly prone to weight gain when you eat the wrong thing. And you can see that those mice are actually eating...
Which is what I've been saying this entire time I've had this damn channel. Not how much you're eating, it's what you're eating.
Less calories than the other mice. So this is a case of less calories, more fatter due to the...
More fatter. he's over here with these 30 acronyms and he's...
aryl hydrocarbon receptor. Now, I just want to go again. I said we were going to follow the...
this is not at all like a hate video. This is like what is actually going on.
Well, look at the...
I'm probably talking through the reality of this.
The pharmaceutical industry is investing in to deal with fatty liver disease. FXR agonism.
If they really wanted to get rid of fatty liver disease, it would be gone. It would be gone. Fatty liver disease makes them a whole lot of money.
It shuts down the aryl hydrocarbon receptor in the liver. FGF19, what does that do? Oh, right, it shuts down the aryl hydrocarbon receptor in the liver.
All right. I've had enough. Can't take it anymore. Yeah, fuck it. Let's just go. Let's make it through the 1830.
PPARs. The aryl hydrocarbon receptor is the thing that controls the PPARs. ACC and SCD1, those are enzymes that are lipogenic enzymes that are upregulated by the AHR. And you saw in that last slide that AHR does indeed activate SCD1 and the other lipogenic genes via the LXR via TI PARP. Okay, that's it for now. Hopefully I've convinced you that the aryl hydrocarbon receptor is incredibly important to whether or not you are obese. Coming up, the next episode, we're going to talk about PUERT. We're going to talk about its effects and bile acids. Is PUERT the...
He made me regret like staying on here. All right. I'm actually going to reach out to him after this in this video. And this guy, I don't know, he does croissant diet, how to lose 40 pounds, eating croissants, cheeseburgers, and Haagen-Dazs ice creams. I've been kind of on a quest to find out why the people who ate potatoes with some fat, basically the French fry diet, and lost so much weight, why it was so effective. So some people mentioned this guy, Brad Marshall. I kind of watched a few of his videos. A lot of them, you know, he just rambles on about acronyms, and it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I did find another person who actually did the croissant diet. So we're going to put that into this video as well. But I don't really want to ramble on about this too much, so I'm going to just send you into the video here.
YouTube, I'm gonna do my review of the croissant diet. Basically, how I lost 40 pounds eating cheeseburgers, cheese, Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
This sounds terrible,
cheesecake, things that are loaded with saturated fat, and avoiding vegetable oil. So here goes. Basically, a little bit of background about me. I'm 53 years old. Many years ago, probably 20 at this point, I competed in bodybuilding, and I was a personal trainer way back when. And have a desk job now. I'm a systems engineer. But anyway, I have always been interested in fitness and health. I've worked out, you know, basically all of my adult life, at least 3 times a week for the most part. And I guess about 7 months ago, October, when I turned 53, I was not really happy with how I looked. Hadn't been for quite a few years. I had put on some weight, and I was 253 pounds.
He looks extremely inflamed. Like crazy inflammation. Look at all this red.
And I was, well, let's just say I wasn't the picture of health. So I decided that I was going to do something about it, but I have tried several things in the past. I've done keto before with a limited amount of success. And when I say I've done keto, I mean, I follow it to the letter, like very strictly. My friends know, like when I do a nutritional program, I was vegan for all of 2019. Basically, for an entire year, I didn't eat any animal products to speak of. About 4 times during the year, I ate something that came from an animal. And being a person who wasn't vegan, that was, you know, somewhat of a challenge. But I decided to do it, and I did. I felt pretty good when I was vegan, although I did have a lot of gastrointestinal discomfort, and it was intermittent. I mean, like sometimes I would have it, sometimes I wouldn't. But overall, I dropped maybe 10 or 12 pounds.
I feel like context is missing.
It just didn't really change, you know, what was going on with me very much as far as body composition goes. So I wanted some.
I mean, even still, I mean, I really don't want this to be like a hate video. I mean, but if you really look at this guy, he's got the bags under his eyes. He's still got, you know, inflammation going on here.
So here's
the thing. You know, just because you lose the weight doesn't mean you're actually healthy. It just means you don't have as much fat on you.
Doing my normal thing, which is when my wife and I are in bed, she's editing her YouTube channel. She's the one that encouraged me to do this. And I'm usually, you know, watching YouTube videos about fitness, nutrition, something like that, or reading PubMed studies about what a nutritional substance does to the human body. Yeah, weird, I know, but it's just something I've always liked, I've been interested in. So somehow, and I'm not sure exactly,
but do this in bed? Not my bedtime routine.
Might have been Ben Greenfield.
You got this woman in bed with you, and you're like watching videos on like Whatever.
Podcasts that mentioned the croissant diet. And so I stumbled onto Brad Marshall and the writings of Brad Marshall on fireinaBottle.net. And I started reading about the croissant diet, and I thought, this is crazy, because conventional wisdom, being a personal trainer, being a person who competed in bodybuilding and knowing, how to get lean, although the methods that I used when I was younger didn't seem to work as well now that I was older, I thought, one thing I pretty much know for sure is you do not want to eat carbs and fat. I mean,
Randall cycle.
You just don't want to do that. And but I read the article about the...
But here again, the Russian study, the Soviet study at first, and then everybody's like, well, it's Soviets, can't trust them. So then the Russians actually did it again. Then you got Denmark in World War I. There was one in, I think, 1852 in America with potatoes only. Did I even say what I was talking about? So these were potato only studies. So you got the Soviet, then you had the Russian, you have the Irish one. I mean, Irish lived on them, for years, but they did have heavy milk with it if they could afford it, or heavy cream with it if they could afford it. You got the Khan study, which was only 2 people. You got Spud Fit, which was 1 person. You got, it's all over the place, but now Spud Fit and the Potato Hack don't have fat in it, but the majority of them did. And they were extremely effective.
Croissant diet and the logic behind it, and it made sense. Basically, if memory serves me right, Brad was saying that he was always puzzled by the fact that in the late 60s, early 70s, the people in France were rail thin, but they ate a diet composed mainly of butter and flour, along with some sugar and some wine. And why was it that these people were so thin, and yet they ate carbs and fat together? Simple sugars even. And so the more I dug into the writings that Brad had posted on fireinaBottle.net, the more intrigued I became, because he linked to a lot of different...
I asked a French person about this, and she said that her thought was because they smoke so much, they drink a lot, they kind of starve themselves a bit. They're always stressed. I don't know. There might be some other things here.
Scientific studies about how basically, in a nutshell, avoiding vegetable oil, polyunsaturated fat, and eating extra saturated fat.
I will say this, though. When I grew up, and not to say that these people didn't eventually have heart attacks, because most of them did. But a lot of the people that I grew up with, especially once I started going and working, a lot of them lunch every day, a lot of them breakfast and lunch every day, McDonald's every day, McDonald's, or Hardee's came in. There's only one of them. The only one of them came here. They still somehow are here 30 years later. But the point of it, as a matter of fact, Burger King once in a while when they did the croissant breakfast, but they were all real thin. They were all real thin. And then, once you started seeing some of the vegetable oils and the peanut oils and that kind of stuff getting added, they started putting a little weight on.
Would flip a switch in your mitochondria and your fat cells and cause your fat cells to burn much more fat. So the more I read, the more I was intrigued, and I decided to, after several days of reading his articles and some of the medical studies that he linked to, I decided to give it a try. So I started off right around my birthday, and the first week I think I dropped 7 or 8 pounds roughly. The second week it was slightly less, 6 or 7 pounds. The next week it was like 4 pounds. The next week it was like 4 pounds. The next week it was 3. And anyway, in about the first 6 weeks I had dropped 18 pounds and taken 2 inches off of my waist. So I wore a size 36 pants for the last 15 years. And now, as of this morning, I was 213.2 pounds from 253. So I don't know 253 point what. I just wrote down.
The inflammation's gone for sure.
So I've dropped 40 pounds in 7 months. Most of it was in the first 6 weeks. The first 18 or so pounds the first 6 weeks, and then the next 22 pounds over the next 4.5 months. So after I had been on it for the first 6 weeks, a buddy of mine asked me what I was doing. We work out together, and he was like, "Hey, I can see you're dropping weight. I want to lose some weight too." And I said, "Well, I'm doing this experiment, but I don't necessarily know 100% that it's healthy. I'll get to that in a minute, but yet it works. I'm dropping body fat like crazy." And so he said, "Okay, I want to try it." So I helped him start. So Rob's my best friend, and so we sat down. We spent a lot of time talking about it. He actually brought a notebook over to the house to write things down, and we designed a nutritional program for him. He's since modified it several times to his own liking, but he understands the rules, and he's dropped close to 40 pounds, and he started around January 1. So, and Rob was a bigger dude than me, but he's dropped 40, and I think the sky's the limit. He's probably going to drop another, 10, 12 pounds or something before he hits his target. I sort of had decided I'd hit my target when I got into.
All right, I'll link this video down below. I'm not pushing this at all. I'm still vegan for life, unless some apocalyptic thing happens and it's just not even possible for some reason. But it's interesting. It is. I mean, if you really think about, if you're old enough, I guess, if you think about back in the 70s, 80s, I mean, you just never. I mean, if you look at like beach pictures, for example, at the beach, obviously, of like 70s, 80s people, you're gonna struggle to find fat people. Now it's like the reverse. You're going to struggle to find skinny people if you see a beach picture. So, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to send it out of here. All right, so enough with all the acronyms and everything. I did, like I said in the beginning of this video, I did find somebody else who did the croissant diet. So I'm going to show that in a couple minutes here. It's not a ton. I think it's like another 8 minutes, but I do know this video is a little bit longer than I probably would like it to be. But what can you do? So anyway, I have nothing really more to say about it. I already said it. You'll see I said it in the video, but here you go. All right, and that's it. Thanks for watching the video. I'm highly not advocating for anybody to go on the croissant diet by any means. I just think it's very interesting. I think I'd have to know a whole lot more about this to really make any kind of judgment on it. Everything just seems very vague with this croissant diet, and I'm not going to go on it anyways. I do find it kind of interesting. The saturated fat part I can definitely see. They started talking about the saturated fat thing way back in the 90s, I believe it was. When the peanut oils and the vegetable oils started coming out. And, it reminds me of Burger King when they first started switching over to whatever oil they did. People were actually pooping themselves because this oil was so far different from what they usually used. And so it was all over the news and the media and everything back in the day. So that's what I remember from when they switched over. And, people have certainly gotten fatter and fatter and fatter ever since they switched. Is it the only reason? No, but it's certainly a contributor. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Leave any comments, questions down below. Like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video.